Okay. Um, I'm talking today to Mark Sheepwash, former paratrooper, career soldier, and Falklands veteran. Hello, Mark.
Hello.
Okay, a quick bit of background. Where did you grow up? Where were you born? Where did you go to school?
I grew up in Ashford in Kent and went to school in Tenterden in Kent. And I was there until I was 16 when I joined Junior Parachute Company in 1980.
What made you join Junior Parachute Company? And what made you join Para Reg in particular?
Joining as a junior was to get away from school quickly as possible. The parachute regiment, I suppose, if you look at the time that I was growing up, if there was no internet, television, you'd see films like Bridge Too Far, and sort of books around the house would be, World War II books, and the exciting bits looked like the paratroopers did them. So that looked like a bit of a job for me.
Okay. So when you went in, could you explain briefly what Junior Para is to people that don't know?
Junior Parachute Company was co-located in Depot Parachute Regiment, which at the time was Browning Barracks in Aldershot. It was boys' service that 16-year-olds could join. You spent between 9 and 12 months in Junior Parachute Company preparing to join an adult recruit platoon, which we joined when they were around week 8 of their training. Covered all military skills, and it basically, at the time, accounted for a massive chunk of the pass rate of P Company and into the regular battalions. It's sort of combined adventure training, sport, and all the rest. But
and you carried on your schooling during that as well?
Yeah, we're supposed to, but that sort of, to me, it looked as if they sort of got the best out of it, and we mainly did things like map reading and navigation. There was an element of schooling in it, but it was Junior Parachute Company stood alone from the junior leaders, which was multi-cap badge, and it was just an early entry into the parachute regiment. And it was a great start for people.
Okay, so when did you go up to your P Company? Obviously, you passed P Company.
Yeah.
What year was that?
That was early 1981. So I joined Junior Para's 46th platoon in Junior Para Company. Late 1980, we went quite early over to Recruit Company. Joined 468 platoon Recruit Company. I think nearly all of the juniors that went to that platoon passed P Company. A very good pass rate on it. And we passed out and went to our respective battalions in April 1981.
And did you have any choice in which battalion you went to?
You could put a preference. I did put 2 para because they were an Aldershot-based battalion at the time. 3 para were in Tidworth, and 1 para were about to start their tour of Edinburgh. So obviously the Scottish contingent were all chucking their hand in for 1 para. And I went a couple of 100 yards up the road to 2 para.
Okay. And what company did you go to?
D Company.
Straight to D Company.
Yeah, D Company with the 3 rifle companies at the time in 2 para, A, B, and D Company. C Company being the patrols, signals, and recce platoon at the time as well. And that was obviously supporting their quarter company. So yeah, I went to D Company.
Okay, so what was your experience prior to the Falklands? Where exercises? Where did you serve?
Yeah, 1981 into early 82 was quite a hectic year. 2 para were just coming back into role after a 2-year island tour. So they were coming back into the parachute role. So a lot of parachute exercises, a lot of airborne exercise, battalion size exercises. We went abroad to Denmark, Kenya in late 81, and early 82. The focus of training was on the upcoming Belize tour, which was to be from late April 82 for 6 months, which we, for obvious reasons, we didn't end up going on.
So when did you first hear, or when did the Falklands first come into your consciousness, and what was the sort of talk about the battalion?
We were on our pre-Belize leave, so the advance party had gone to Belize. The battalion's equipment had started moving to Belize, and we were on leave, ready to go. So, like all tours, you were on leave, and it was report back from leave, and we were off to Belize.
How did they get in touch with you?
We were got in touch with by telegram. Back in those, telegram, wow. And some people had a knock on the door from the local police.
All right, okay.
So it was all sort of kicking off, and I remember people asking us on leave, you know, are you going to the Falklands? And I was saying, well, no, we're going to Belize, you know, so we won't be going there because Belize was at the time an operational tour. Quite disappointed to see on the news 3 para getting recalled and us not. And then lo and behold, yeah, we've got the telegram and back to Aldershot, which we all promptly did. Only to be stood down for the Easter weekend because nobody knew what was going on. And right. Most people from that point just stayed in Aldershot, and we had it kept getting postponed because there was lots of sort of delay about how we were going to travel. No one was quite decided where we were going to join this boat and all the rest of it. And consequently, there were several last nights in Aldershot.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
So when did you go down? You went down and joined the Norland?
The Norland sailed down from Hull down to Portsmouth, and the battalion got on the boat in Portsmouth, and we left from there. Okay,
so what sort of training were you able to do on the Norland as you headed south?
Well, there was a lot of training done actually, and looking back, it was quite well thought out for the limited space and resources there were on a boat. We managed to do a lot of fitness, running around the decks, PT up on the helipads, down on the lower decks under the PTIs. There was obviously a big emphasis on brushing up on the first aid training, signals training. There was a lot of cross training done. Mainly on the support weapons because of the priority that have to be given to them. So a lot of people cross-trained in the rifle companies on mortars, anti-tank weapons, etc. So yeah, it was a very busy, full-on training program.
Right.
Every single.
Go on.
Yeah. Well, there was a busy training program every single day.
Yeah. On there. And how did you feel going down there?
Absolutely fine. Absolutely fine.
Looking forward to it, or apprehensive?
I think most people would have been very disappointed if we turned back. There was a lot of talk that this is just a show of force. This is to put pressure on. It's political. You know, don't be surprised if we all turn around and go back. We all have to get off the boat somewhere. You know, like Sierra Leone or something. But as it was, we kept going, and it became obvious that we weren't going to be turning back once. There was more sort of military action, mainly naval action, ships getting hit further on, because we were catching up with the main task force a lot of the way. It sort of become quite obvious, I think, that it was going to be a go, and then it was more a case of how we were going to conduct that operation, and how we were going to put troops ashore, rather than if.
Right. Okay. So when did you? Obviously, you transferred from the Norland to one of the landing craft for the landing?
Well, yeah, we did, but we didn't transfer to one of the troop ships like the Intrepid.
Right.
3 para did from the Canberra. We did it directly from the Norland, out of a side, unceremoniously out of a side door, straight into the LCUs, the landing craft, in something like a 12-foot swell. Which took a lot longer than when we practiced it at Ascension Island, because it was like a duck pond at Ascension Island. So it took a long time to get the battalion loaded, a company at a time, into their landing craft. And that was quite a hairy experience. We'd heard the diversionary raid earlier, that the Special Forces had done on Goose Green. A lot of noise from that, quite a bit of naval gunfire supporting that, again, as part of the dissection. And yeah, at that point, we were in the landing craft with the water swilling around our feet, heading towards the shore.
Were there enough landing craft to get the whole battalion in?
Yep, the company size, so there was 4 or 5 landing craft to put the battalion ashore. So you were in a whole company group going towards the beach.
How did the landing go?
Okay, some companies didn't get as far as the beach and that sort of getting chest deep wading. We were D company's landing craft. I think I had to put 1 foot in the water and that was it. We were pretty much assured that it would be an unopposed landing, but not 100%. So with the ramp going down, you know, all those sort of old newsreel clips we've seen of Normandy, you know, there was a thought, the round's going to start arriving in the landing craft when the front goes down, but it didn't. Completely unopposed landing, which went quite smoothly down on D Company's part of the beach. And 2 Para were the first troops ashore, other than the Special Forces before that, which is quite a feather in the cap for 2 Para. And from there, then we started the huge march up to the top of Sussex Mountain, which was a battalion's first objective, and where we were to be for about a week.
Right, and what the conditions were obviously the major problem.
Well, other than the fact that it was a massive march up to the top of there, quite obviously from sea level right up to the top. I can't remember the height of the mountain, but it was a long way, and we had a lot of equipment. And for all that we'd been training for all those weeks while we was on the boat, you know, it's first time getting the old legs back ashore, and that was a hard tab up to the top of there.
What sort of loads were you carrying, weight wise?
God, absolutely definitely 100 pound plus. Initially, most people had 1 or 2 mortar bombs, 81mm mortar bombs, because part of the planning was obviously to get a mortar line set up as quickly as possible. Now, the ammunition couldn't come ashore by helicopter until first light. So what could be man-packed was, so that there was an initial mortar line. There was a point when everyone was looking forward to getting to the point where they dropped off the greenies that they were carrying. But there was a massive amount of equipment carried in, you know, frontline scales of live ammunition, you know, a lot heavier than the blank that gets carried on exercise. 66 launchers, you know, grenades, all the rest of it, medical equipment, all the signals equipment, large amount of equipment carried. It was a heavy old march up to the top of there.
Yeah, I bet. So once you've gone up to Sussex Mountain, would you dig in as best you could?
Yeah, dug in best we could, found that you couldn't dig very deep at all. And this was a continuing thing right across right throughout the campaign, actually. You couldn't dig more than a couple of inches before you got into the water. So it was a case of dig a very shallow shell scope and build it up with peat. So we had like little peat bunkers all around the place. It was in a company position on the top of there, as part of the battalion position, overlooking San Carlos water, overlooking the ships, when the air battles were going on and the bombing of the ships. You know, absolute grandstand view from up there, sitting watching what would subsequently become some quite sort of well-known clips of film, ships exploding, sinking, breaking up in San Carlos water right in front of us. You know, Harriers quite literally having dogfights with A4s and Mirage jets.
Quite an experience.
Quite a thing to watch.
Yeah. So you're in a rifle company, D Company.
Yeah.
What was your job?
My job in the rifle company or in the platoon was I was a GPMG gunner.
Right.
We had a lot of GPM by the time, because 2 Para were one of the last to leave the UK. They had been opening up all the war stocks of weapons, and we got basically an extra battalion's worth of GPMGs issued to us. So we 2-Para were working with 2 per rifle section, which is great. There's a lot of firepower.
Yeah.
So a lot of ammunition to carry.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, as you know, they eat up the ammunition. So there was, you know, pros and cons to that.
Yeah.
We had a huge amount of firepower, but a lot of ammunition to carry, and a lot of ammunition that we got through, obviously. So that was my job, if you like,
yeah.
within the rifle.
So when was the next move?
The next move, so it's quite interesting actually, and this one hasn't been written about too much and doesn't get spoke about a lot. But our first move, and I was having to think about this. It was on the 3rd or the 4th night, I think 3rd night. The platoon, 12 platoon, were given orders for a fighting patrol to go by helicopter from Sussex Mountain to take a house out on the coast called Cantera House, which the battalion were going to use. We were to take it and hold it, and the battalion were going to use it as their sort of staging post for moving on to Goose Green. Subsequently, they didn't. They used Camilla Creek House, but the first part of the plan was to use Cantera House. We were told that there were Argentine troops there, and we were given a full set of orders to, you know, kill the enemy at grid, you know, and we were being told this is the first time this order's been given to troops for, you know, God knows how many years. It was all quite exciting. Went down, we moved by Sea King helicopter. We had a forward observation officer from the artillery with us and his party. And we sort of realised, having got the brief to do it, and then going down to get on the helicopter after last flight, and the CO and the RSM were there to see us off, we started realising it was all quite serious.
Yeah.
And we went off to Cantera House. Eventually found it because we were quite obviously put down not where the pilots thought they were going to be putting us down. It took quite a lot to on quite a featureless bit of land to actually find this house, which was right on the beach. We found it, approached it, expecting to have a firefight at the very least with the Argentinian occupants, to find they'd gone. We then spent a couple of days at that house with troops dug in around it and some inside it, while there were communications with the battalion about whether they were going to come there or not. And at one point we tapped halfway back to Sussex Mountain, being told to abort it, only to be told to turn around and go back again. So we were really putting the miles in. An interesting little thing happened while we were at the house. Across the bay every morning we could hear the distinctive sound of a Huey helicopter. We had this 2 mornings on the trot. Now we knew that the Argentinians had Hueys, and after when they decided we wouldn't use it, we had to tab back to Sussex Mountains, which was one hell of a march back up there, given what we'd already done, and the fact we'd been halfway back there once already and gone back. And when we got back to the top of Sussex Mountain, looking forward to a bit of a rest after this aborted fighting patrol, which turned into another very long tab, we were told that the battalion were moving out that night to Camilla Creek. Oh, great, you know.
Yeah.
Battalion march. To go back to the helicopter, what we subsequent after, and to jump forward a bit, after the battalion took Goose Green, we were told that on the questioning of some Argentinian intelligence officers, the Huey was resupplying an OP that they had, and they did actually know that we were at that house and were planning a company attack on us. That they were going to bring a company by Chinook from Port Stanley, and aborted it because of the weather. I think we were quite lucky that they didn't.
Yeah.
Because we were very lightly armed and quite literally had our backs to the sea, nowhere to go.
So, nowhere to go.
No, and I'm sure the company attack that would have involved support weapons on their part and all the rest of it, and we would have potentially been in a lot of trouble there.
Yeah.
back up the Sussex Mountain and moving off that night as a battalion to Camilla Creek, which did become the battalion holding area, assembly area, prior to the start of the attack.
Okay, and so how long were you there?
At Camilla Creek, we were there we got there during the early hours of the morning, the day before the attack. There was the well documented the signallers tuning into the BBC World Service.
Yeah.
Hearing the BBC announce that we were about to attack Goose Green, which point the CEO was ranting around, saying he was going to be suing them when he got back. In fact, no, he'd get his wife to sue them before he even got back. And I do remember all the shouting and ranting coming from battalion headquarters, and somebody saying that's the CEO absolutely throwing a fit over what's been announced and all
Quite
of us.
rightly.
You know, just quite rightly. And as a private soldier, you know, even as a private, thinking, oh, that's great, they've told them. Cheers. We spent the day there, dug in there, watching the Harriers go overhead, doing airstrikes onto the positions around Darwin and Goose Green. And they knew where we were as well. And it was quite, they would go in, you know, deliver their cluster bombs and all the rest of it onto Goose Green and come back. Some were doing little victory rolls over the top of us. Quite good for morale, watching that the day before the attack. And then, having got orders, we moved off before first light the following morning with the battalion A company were forward left, B company forward right, and D company in reserve. And that was the start of the move off onto Arlington positions.
Okay, and what time did you cross the start line?
Time I can't remember, but although it would have been late because everything was late.
Right.
Because it was between, I do remember that between Camilla Creek and the first positions, it was pretty featureless across there, just at marshy ground, and there was quite a lot of stopping and starting while people were guided onto positions by the reconnaissance had been done by the patrols and the recce platoon.
Right.
Who were putting people on there. I do remember a difficult stream crossing that I think we crossed about 3 times. There must have been a to and froing going on. The attack started. You know, I certainly can remember A company hitting their first position and hearing that off forward of us.
What sort of time of day is this?
This was before first light.
Right.
This would have been sort of, you know, 2, 3 o'clock, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
Very early morning. We were very quickly committed as a reserve company to positions that we were told were to our front, and we quite literally just advanced to contact in the dark. We'd been told, and it seemed like very quickly we were told, move, as it does when you're in reserve, you've got to move quick. There's positions to the front, got to be taken out, which we did. We kept going. There was nothing there, nothing in front, and all of a sudden it all just lit up with, to our shock, and it was one of those surprising things, a load of green tracer coming our way. It was all of our tracer being red, orange. Just a surprise. I think it was more of a shock than the fact that we were under fire, was the fact that it was green. I thought, well, that's easy to distinguish then. And there was about a company-sized position right in front of us. Literally, we were right on top of it. Trenches with small tents over the top, little 2-man tents, pouring down with rain. A lot of light was going up. In fact, too much light went up. There should have been more light discipline, but everybody in there to eagerness to get onto the position, putting the light up, so all the light went up, and then all the light went out, and we're back into the dark again. But it wasn't difficult to find a position. They were right in front of us. And
what were you doing? How were you approaching? Were you sort of pepper potting forward? Were you, just fire and maneuver, or was it?
Initially, everybody just hit the ground, as you do.
Yeah.
And there was probably a bit of a pause where everyone just sort of looked at it going, sort of, wow, look at that. And I don't actually remember being afraid at that point. It was a bit like being on exercise, except there was some colourful tracer coming back the other way. And
was there a lot of fire coming from
there? There was a lot, yeah. There was a lot, and it was quite accurate. There was quite a tendency to think, oh, I can't move because I'm under fire. But I very quickly realised, one, that you had to move, and two, that if you did, you didn't get hit immediately, which is great. So I can actually move about. And very quickly, junior commanders, section commanders, etc., gathering people up and just started getting straight into, without plan, just straight into the positions that were in front of us, selecting trenches and starting to take those trenches out, which we did.
Right. Okay. So that was the first position. And you were you in a fire support role at this? You giving covering fire, or you fighting with the rest of the?
Yeah, although it was directly in front of us, and at one point, myself and the guy who was the number 2 on the GPMG with me, the two of us just took out a trench because it was right in front of us. We covered each other up to it, and I'd stopped very short of it, and he went up, grenaded it, and then as per normal drills, after the grenade had gone off, fired into the trench. We cleared it, ripped the tent off, bodies in there, moved on. I did actually fall in one of the, I can't remember if it was that one or the second one that we did, but I did, the light went out and I did actually fall in the trench that we'd just taken out, running on thin air above it, like something from a Tom and Jerry movie. But it was very, very difficult in the dark, very difficult, that control to keep everyone together.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the guys from one of the other platoons in the company was with me and my number 2. I remember saying to him, "How did you get here?" He said, "I don't know. I just got it just in the mixture in the dark, people crossing over." And having taken that position out, the company reorganised just prior to first light, and was still in a sort of real
on the position, or you?
No, beyond that, we're up. There was a main track that ran down towards Goose Green. That was the sort of battalion's axis, and at that point we were on that track. I believe A and B company pushed out left and right again, and it continued, and we were sort of holding back in reserve. But there was quite a period there of reorganisation, distribution of ammo, bit of chat going around about, who'd been wounded the night before, or, we'd heard that some guys in one of the other platoons had been killed. We hadn't lost anyone in our platoon during that attack. And there was also the fact that everything was taking a lot longer than planned. The sort of battalion plan was to have this rolled up by first light. We were coming up to first light now. We'd only taken sort of one position. So it was getting quite obvious it was going to be a pretty long day. And as first light came up, we moved forward more behind B company than A company. And we're pretty much sitting out in the open. And for quite a long period of time, we're subject to a lot of incoming artillery and mortar fire, and after a while, even sniper fire. As you do, sitting there in a platoon saying, why don't we move from it? This isn't good, wait for an order for the company to move. And I believe the company commander was trying to move the company forward onto a reverse slope, but was being told to stay back out of it by the commanding officer.
Right.
And he was not just thinking about moving us from this open ground, but also where we could be best deployed. Eventually, we did move up behind Darwin Hill and Boker Hill that B company were trying to secure, and that did get us out of the indirect fire from the mortars and the artillery, and the bit of sniper fire that we'd had incoming, which was getting a bit hairy because every round seemed to get closer and closer. You know, we think, well, they're really getting their eye in on us here.
What sort of support fire were you getting?
For us, there had been a frigate, HMS Arrow, which had been designated in a fire support role. It had a major stoppage, a mechanical failure on its main armament as we crossed the start line. So we lost the 4.5-inch gun from Arrow. That had to withdraw. We had our own mortars, although there was only one section of mortars taken. The mortar platoon consisted of 2 barrels with the rest of the platoon man-packing mortar ammunition for them, and doing a constant running resupply on foot to those 2 mortars. I believe that decision was taken because the intelligence hadn't been that good on the amount of enemy there, and this was meant to be quite a light, small enemy. And one section of mortars was deemed to be enough fire support for the battalion. We did have, I believe, I can't remember if it was a half battery or battery of 105s, which there was some fire support from. But as a Tom in the rifle section, it's not that noticeable. You know, you're thinking, why aren't I getting, you know, the biggest barrage since D-Day in front of me?
So I suppose with only two mortar barrels to support a whole battalion, you couldn't call in fire from the mortars. But that was being dealt with by the MFCs anyway. That's obviously got to be prioritised, and you know. So that's going to come from Battalion HQ. Yeah. So you've got no specific fire support for your actions. No, especially not at that point as the reserve company. Yeah. So we moved up behind the hill. While we're there, the OC, the company commander, took the decision. Well, we're sat in behind it. We're out of all that indirect fire, and told us to get a brew on, which is quite good because up on the top of the hill we could hear a whole load of fighting going on, which is A company fighting. We were completely unaware really of what was going on. It was just it sounded like a company attack. It's all good. And there was a lot of fire coming down onto B company who didn't seem to be moving onto their objective. Again, as a Tom in a rifle company, you don't really know. Yeah. You're just moved in and we're told, right, so the most important thing in your life at that point is getting a brew on. Great, let's get brews on. Sure enough, as all old soldiers will know, as soon as you get it on, right, you get prepared to move. Burning your lips on a cup of hot chocolate. And we were... somebody did mention at that point that the CEO had been killed, and it was a bit confused. And I remember there was more confusion about, well, who's running the show now then? Obviously, it was Italian to IC, but I think people were thinking more along the lines of, well, he's got to move, you know, from where he was up to take over the battle. What happened at that point, the company did a huge right flanking along the beach. The positions on Boke Hill that were holding B company up, that they were caught in the open ground and couldn't move from. It's decided we were going to go right flanking up the beach, which has got a sort of rocky beach with a bit of a cliff, and take the position out from there. About halfway along that sort of move around the beach, there was a little headland that jutted out that all of the most of the company's support weapons, the GPMGs and the anti-tank weapons, were put in a fire support base under the company 2IC to cover the company forward onto the position. And the position was a lot of bunkers up on the top of the hill, quite a lot of movement between the bunkers. And once the fire support group was in position, we did hit quite a few of the people in there, and good use was made of the anti-tank missiles and Milans to take out the bunkers. And it didn't take long for white flags
of sorts, white rags, to start waving out of the bunkers up on the.
What sort of was this a platoon size position you were attacking? Company size?
It was about platoon size,
right.
Platoon plus probably.
Yeah.
The company went, and I do remember from that headland that we were on. I remember it being a range of 7. I remember setting, or somebody saying that it was 700 meters, and us firing at 700 and getting rounds down on that position. We did check firing pretty quickly on there, because the company were coming up on foot from the beach to go up and actually take that position. There was quite a lot of casualties up there and quite a bit of destruction already, and they didn't actually need to to completely assault the position, but just go up and secure it. And it had taken quite a lot of maneuvering to get the company in position to do that. I suppose quite a safe attack. They did walk into a minefield on the way up. And in fact, I remember one of the guys managing to set off an anti-tank mine, which knocked a lot of people over. It didn't actually, I don't think it didn't even wound anybody. I think it was set up with some sort of tripwire affair. But yeah, quite a large, like an old Mark 7 round anti-tank mine.
Right.
This enormous boom, and we all weren't sure what's happening. So a few people were getting blown around a bit from it. But once that was secure, we'd moved forward up onto that position. There was another company reorg up on there, and very quickly the decision was taken to move from there down the forward slope towards the airfield. We could see Goose Green settlement from there, and just on our side of the settlement was the airfield. So that was pretty much the objective secure, and we moved after a quick reorg. The company moved at the double running to get down and secure the airfield. And we were going towards sort of late afternoon by now. So it had been
what were the Argentines doing at this point?
Well, we had a whole load of prisoners and casualties up on that position, which were obviously fed back through the chain through.
Yeah. But there was no more opposition at this point?
Not on that position, no. Over on the left flank, A Company had taken Darwin Hill. That was obviously where the CO was lost, and A Company took quite a few casualties there. And the advance down to Goose Green from there was basically D Company on the right and C Company, and I believe a platoon or half a platoon from A Company on the left. So in normal style, C Company patrols and recce, having done their bit of securing start lines and guiding the battalion in, have then gone into reserve, and then have been brought forward sort of in a rifle platoon role for that part of the assault. As we got down close, very close to the airfield, there was the airfield on the right, and there was the large white wooden boarded schoolhouse on the left, 2-story building with like all buildings down there with a tin roof, which was being used as a sort of a headquarters for the Argentinian army. As we were coming down the forward slope towards that, all of a sudden, all hell let loose from down on the airfield area, where there were the next line of troops that were dug in on the end of the airfield. And also what they brought into play in the ground role was the anti-aircraft guns that were on the airfield, and they're turning them onto us coming down the forward slope in the ground role.
They were Orlicans, weren't they?
Yeah. There were 35 millimeter and 20 millimeter cannons, I believe. They mainly went over the top of D Company, although they were quite scary, big old rounds going over, and they were whacking into the ground just sort of over our heads, but going down into the middle of C Company and the A Company platoon, and they took quite a few casualties from them. And there was sort of a race to get down into this dead ground, which was sort of a natural dip. There was a bit of a stream down in there before you went up on our side to the airfield or over to the schoolhouse in the case of C Company.
Had they not mined the dead ground at all?
there were mines down there. We could see where that was. They weren't that good at marking their minefields. There was quite a bit of scattering, I think. I know that ahead of us, we saw a couple of cows get blown up. Obviously, you know, in battle, everyone thinks it's just troops fighting. Of course, there's the normal stuff from everyday life still going on. So the cattle were running onto the mine, and there were. I remember there were a couple of cows blown up down there in the bottom. I think quite a lot of sheep running about as well, but I certainly remember the dead cows and people saying that's a minefield in front, and getting around that. Now, I was on I think I was probably the very left-hand man of D Company actually at that point. I was certainly the left-hand man of the platoon. Up to the right of us was the position that had a Argentine flag on it on the end of the airfield. So it became known as the flagpole position, and there were troops at the base of that dug in around that area, just on the end of the airfield, surrendering. And it became quite an infamous incident. The platoon commander of 12th Platoon, Lieutenant Jim Barry, decided that he was going to go out and take the surrender of these guys who were surrendering. And he went forward with a section from the platoon, Paul Sullivan's section. He went forward to speak to him. He was seen gesturing with his weapon to put your weapons down, which they started doing. And all of a sudden, they just opened fire on him and the section that had gone forward with him. They were all in the open ground. There was a lot of talk, you know, afterwards about them luring people in with a white flag. And I think it's generally accepted now they weren't luring anybody in with a white flag. They were genuinely surrendering, but came under fire from another 2-para position that didn't realise a surrender was taking place. And having come under fire, they obviously thought, well, there's no point trying to surrender. We've got to fight then. And that was with our platoon commander and a section right in front of meters in front of them. He was killed instantly. The section commander was killed, Paul Sullivan. Nigel Smith, section 2IC, was killed. A couple of the guys were wounded in that, and there was quite a lot of sort of, you know, chaos, but also some very brave behaviour from some of the guys in that section, and also Platoon Sergeant John Meredith, who was awarded DCM for his actions. Down in my position, I couldn't actually see any of that other than getting word. The only word I got of what was going on up the top there, although I could see it, was in no position to support it because I was in dead ground, was being told the platoon commander's dead. I was actually providing fire support across onto the schoolhouse at that point for a C Company's attack, and which is also being joined by a section from 11 Platoon from D Company. At that point, in the middle of a lot of confusion, as you can imagine, the platoon was absolutely in turmoil, having, you know, 2 NCOs killed, although we didn't know that. Other guys wounded, didn't know about them. Platoon commander dead, yes, we had got word of that. Platoon sergeant doing sterling work, sorting all that out. In the middle of our section, and we were taking a lot of incoming now as well, a lot of incoming fire. There were quite a lot of positions up the track along the airfield that we were taking fire from. Another officer I'd never seen in my life from C Company came up the track and saw our GPMG and said we needed to get it forward to provide fire support for C Company. We're going to exploit beyond the schoolhouse. I remember there was quite a bit of discussion about, yes, we should go, no, we shouldn't go. And there, as well as him, there were also a couple of other guys from patrols.
Puts you in a difficult position because you're being asked to leave your company, aren't you?
Yeah, not leaving. I think basically it was a case of getting the whole section to go forward, but there were people at the back of the section who were getting the message. I later found out that the OC has said, no one's to go forward from here, but us, we didn't know, you know.
Yeah.
And it started off with the whole section moving off up this track with the officer from C Company, with a couple of guys from patrols platoon that were mixed in with us as well at that point. You know, go back to all this, how people end up, you know, mixing up with each other, and crawling up the track, which was no deeper than sort of, you know, tire ruts for a Land Rover, which is the only bit of cover it was, and with a lot of very close incoming fire. And every time I looked round behind me, more and more people had dropped off. And you know, sort of torn between, well, we've got to keep going with the ones. You can't just let somebody in front of us go out there on his own. But people behind us were sort of saying, no, come back. And up we went. There basically ended up with three of us, myself, number two on my GPMG, and this officer from C Company, having to fight our way into a bit of cover, basically, on the end of the airfield. Now, the attack that we were going to provide the fire support for didn't happen, because they obviously consolidated on the schoolhouse that they'd attacked and around that area. And we ended up in a very uncomfortable position up on the end of the airfield, actually in the ammunition storage area for the aircraft, which by now was on fire and exploding.
Right.
Having taken a couple of trenches out as we went up onto there, nobody back in the company really knew what had happened to us. I think they thought we were dead, or when we did get back to them the next morning, we were sort of down as missing. Last time we saw them was crawling off up a track. And so we sort of found ourselves between the Argentine front positions and where D Company had stopped. And we were sort of in a no man's land, if you like, on the airfield. Quite an uncomfortable position. At that point, there was the one airstrike of the day from the Argentinians, which was Pucaras that had flown from Port Stanley. And one came straight down the track we were on, over our heads. And as it went over, you could have just about hear the sort of chink noise as it released what I thought was its fuel tank. It wasn't, it was napalm. And it narrowly missed D Company and B Company. And small arms fire from both companies actually shot it down. And I remember seeing the pilot bail out, an orange and white parachute. He came down amongst B Company, took him prisoner. So at this point, we were on the airfield and in this very uncomfortable position with the ammunition exploding all around us, all these underwing rockets and things. The airfield was being used for Pucaras. Pucaras. And all this lot was going up like a massive firework display. And we were right in the middle of it. And we said, we'd better get out there. And we said also, there's some big fuel tanks there as well, which we later found out were fully loaded up napalm pods, not fuel tanks. And they were getting hit by small arms rounds.
Wow.
Our guys didn't know that we were in there. They were firing into this fuel dump, this ammo dump.
This is D Company firing over your position.
Yeah. They didn't know we were in there. And it had been the Argentinian position where the white flag had been up. We were there amongst where the Argentinian flag was up the pole, the Argentinian position that had been whacked by our guys, and all this ammunition going up. And the safest place we could get very quickly was beyond it, not back towards D Company.
Right.
So out on the airfield at the side of the track in the gorse. It's quite an uncomfortable position to be in. And down in front of us, we could see the settlement, Goose Green, and behind what were large sheep sheds, like, massive great big farm buildings, if you like, we could see, we got a first view of the Argentinian gun line, the artillery. And we could see it firing from over the shed. Crikey. And also at that point, we also saw helicopters landing beyond the settlement where they're bringing in reinforcements from Port Stanley. to reinforce the garrison. And we're getting a grandstand view of this, no comms, no radio. And it was starting to get dark. Light was going. And the three of us sat there. You got two Toms with, about a year in battalion who go pro to it, or even still at that point, an officer we didn't know. And we sat tight and formulated a plan between us to actually assault the gun line in Goose Green.
Wow. So
we can see it. We lined up the GPMG with it because we had no night sight, and we said it's going to get dark.
It's quite a drastic plan, though, isn't it?
It was, yeah. So we lined up the GPMG, said, right, don't move that. I remember we consolidated our ammunition between the three of us, and it wasn't a lot. I can remember the belt, I had all the ammunition that we had actually on the GPMG. It was probably about 100 rounds. It wasn't a lot, gone through a lot of ammo. And there were a few magazines and a couple of grenades, definitely a couple of L2 HE grenades. And the plan was those two were going to go down the track, lob grenades at this gun line. And when I heard the grenades go off, I was at fire at the gun line while they were going to leg it back up the track, picking me up, and we were just going to run back towards Two Para's position. Now, what we didn't know is at that same time, the pilot who had been shot down was being led down into Goose Green by a patrol from the patrols platoon to negotiate the surrender of the Argentinian garrison with the Battalion 2IC, the acting CO, with these terms for their surrender. Now, had we carried out this attack on their gun line, we could have actually gone and screwed up that whole plan. But we didn't know that. It had gone fairly quiet from the battalion behind us, and I suppose we could be forgiven for thinking, which what we did think at that time, was that we'd left, the last time we were in the company, in our platoons, things didn't appear to be going that well, and we actually thought the battalion had withdrawn.
Was understandable.
And we were going to have this one crack at their gun line, because as we realised, being so far forward, no one else has probably seen where that is. We're going to have that one crack at it and then leg it, basically just doing what we could. So those two set off down the track, and I laid there on the GPMG, feeling sort of slightly alone, waiting for the grenades to go off. And I waited and waited and waited. And next thing I know, there's two people coming up the track towards me. Shit, who's that? I thought, if I start firing at them, we haven't really planned for this. And it turned out it was them two coming back. And they said, we can't get near it. There's Argentinians everywhere. Can't get anywhere near it. And we decided to make our way back up the track, the way we'd come, very carefully, because we were going back towards the battalion, although we didn't know where they were. We decided to take off our helmets and take our berries out from inside, we had inside our smocks, and put them on as a bit of recognition. Back up the track, and we also took down the Argentinian flag off of the flagpole on the way. And last time I saw that was actually framed in Two Para Officers' Mess.
Right.
And that did stay with the battalion, and that got taken down on the way back. On the way back up the track, it was quite surreal. Obviously, all the firing had stopped, and there was a lot of the gorse was on fire. There were bodies, lots of Argentinian bodies where they'd fallen. And walking along, I think tripped over a couple of bodies, and it really quite surreal. And we knew that we'd gone back past the point where we'd left the company, which again made us think even more. It sort of reinforced that view that we had, that they had withdrawn, which they had, but only to sort of reorganise, not actually withdraw as such from the battle. We then made a decision to sit it out until first light. So we're not going to find anyone. We also said we run the risk here of just getting shot up by our own guys if we walk into them. And as we got further down that track, at one point, sounds a bit corny, but we thought what we can do as a bit of recognition, we whistled right of the Valkyries as we went down the track, in case there was anyone directly in front.
That's initiative.
No point in walking along constantly repeating a password or something you're not even being challenged for. So just, we got our berries on and whistling right of the Valkyries. Anyway, over there, and we stopped in a gorse bush for the night, and we stagged on, one on stag, two asleep. Although there wasn't much sleeping being done, it was freezing, snowing as well. Basically just sat in a gorse bush for the night. And first thing in the morning, the three of us got a little bit of a panic on because we heard a tracked vehicle coming very close to us. We didn't see it, and it went by, and we were aware that the Argentinians did have tracked vehicles. We didn't see it, and we thought that's probably what it was. What it actually was it was a British vehicle. It was one of the Marines' BVs, one of the Snowcats.
Right.
It was doing a resupply. So we set off again, still heading back, and we saw a load of guys on. There was quite a low hill in front of us, a load of guys on there, and we couldn't work out if they were British or Argentinian. Two of us stayed put. The officer who was with us, Lieutenant Kennedy, said, "Right, I'm going to go up to them." He said, "If they take me prisoner, just shoot at them and leg it. You're on your own." Went up to them and then waved us up. It was actually C Company. We got called up onto a position, and they were getting resupplied with ammunition and rations. I remember the two of us got a ration pack thrown at us, which we devoured in about 5 minutes flat. Been a good 24 hours before we had really eaten anything.
Yeah.
And we were taken back to D Company in one of the Snowcat vehicles that was doing. They said that vehicle's going over to D Company with a resupply. Get yourselves back over with them.
Yeah.
We did, promptly arrived with the greeting of "Where the FNL have you two been?" It's quite a long story, but I've told you about this. And we're sort of given the news. I remember being told about the guys who've been killed in a platoon. Crikey, that was all going on. The story started sort of coming together. People telling you, I've been wounded about what was happening at that time when we disappeared off up the track. People saying we had you two down as missing in action, really, not dead, but didn't think we were going to see you again. So and we were back.
Quite an adventure.
Yeah, it's quite a day.
Yeah, absolutely. So what happened after that?
That day there was obviously the whole surrender of the Argentinians going on. There was a lot of sorting out to be done. There was a lot of prisoners to be looked after. There were also, although we'd taken it, it wasn't all just sort of sit down and have a brew and get the fags out. There were defensive positions to be made. We made good use of the Argentinian positions that were there anyway. Plus dug some new ones. I know people were kept busy digging trenches, digging positions for weapons to be put into. And I remember Platoon Sergeant telling me in later years that there were some people he had to keep busy because they were sort of still quite shocked from the day before. So it was all good sort of leadership stuff from him, keeping the platoon busy. And we dug ourselves some positions. The battalion was on sort of about 50% in the defensive positions. Obviously wanted to get guys in and get them admin in the shed. There were a lot of sheds and things in Goose Green settlement that we could get into, try and get some hot water on for a brew and a quick wash and all the rest of it. And desperately waiting for our Bergens to come forward. So things like DOS bags and whatever, which we hadn't seen for a few days at that point. Just to get ourselves admin and find out what on earth was going to go on next, and sort of sitting there and letting the enormity of what just happened, this massive land battle, sort of sink in. That we really have just been in a full size, battle.
Yeah.
Incredible, really. And we didn't really know what was going to happen to us after that. We did think, because there'd been quite a lot of, as well as people killed, quite a few casualties in the battalion, and we weren't sort of sure what the all-up strength was and the sort of capability of the battalion, whether we would actually be used again. There are even people, we might even get put back on the ship and get sent home now, because we knew that there were other troops. 5 Infantry Brigade were coming ashore at that time, Gurkhas, Scots Guards, Welsh Guards, this kind of thing. There was a bit of talk of that might be us done now, of course it wasn't. Good old two-para style, on we went.
So how, in terms of your own platoon, you'd had quite a lot of casualties, both deaths and wounded.
Yeah. So we had the platoon was reorganised into 2 sections, and we did actually get a new platoon commander, because a bit quirky. We had a spare platoon commander in battalion headquarters, who was meant to have taken over our platoon before, but our platoon commander, Jim Barry, had been killed. Basically, he was a great sailing man. He was meant to go away and be in a team for the America's Cup, which didn't happen because of the Falklands War. So therefore, the platoon commander, John Page, who was going to take over the platoon, didn't, until he found himself getting presented with 2/3 of a platoon, platoon commander. So new platoon commander, his first platoon given to him, missing a whole section under the
campaign.
Yeah, mid-campaign, under the strong guidance of a good platoon sergeant.
Which you certainly.
So, yeah.
So what happened next then? What came after Goose Green?
After that, there was a move forward by helicopter, actually, just forward of Bluff Cove Mountain, just the other side of Fitzroy, onto a position up on the hills there, which I think was deemed as a bit too much of a leap forward. We were too far ahead of troops who were moving on foot, and at that time they were also moving troops from 5 Brigade by boat around the southern route towards Fitzroy. And the position we were on was also within range of the largest guns in Port Stanley at that point. We just fell within range of that, and we did actually, I remember when we got off of the helicopters up there, we did immediately get a bit of incoming artillery fire, and so we were actually, well within range of Port Stanley at that point. And we were subsequently drawn back into Fitzroy settlement, which is where the battalion was, when, having spent a day or two looking at these big ships that were anchored just off of the beach, in the middle of a battalion sort of admin session, or about half the battalion on admin, half out in the positions, jets came in and bombed the ship, which was the Sir Galahad, the Welsh Guards along.
So you went.
Yeah, the battalion became involved in basically getting the guys ashore from the lifeboats, and dishing out the first aid to the guys from the Welsh Guards who were on this ship.
Were you personally involved in that, or witnessed?
No, I was out in. Half the battalion, as I say, we're in. And when I say half the battalion, it was like half sections were out in the trenches. Yeah. Half the time doing admin inside the settlement, securely able to do your admin. So at that point, my GPMG needed a really good clean. I had it stripped as much as I could when the ship was bombed. We obviously went running out the door, and I was assembling a GPMG as I was running out the door, and we went straight out to the trenches. So it was out there, and the gun was in action by the time the second wave of aircraft came in. There was a second wave that came in to attack the ships, and D Company was actually credited with hitting one of those, A4 Skyhawk. So No, I was out in the trenches.
Yeah.
When that second wave came in, but there was obviously a lot of the battalion down there dealing with the guys who were getting brought ashore.
Yeah. Okay, so after that particular incident, when did you move forward again?
We had a few days there, and our next move was up to Mount Kent. So obviously, the whole brigade, we were part of 3 Commando Brigade, were moving towards these final positions around Stanley, the mountains around Port Stanley, Tumble Down, Longdon, Two Sisters, and all the rest. And there were obviously there was a big plan in place for the final push on to Port Stanley. Out there, we a lot of manoeuvring about, quite a lot of tabbing around, quite a bit of sort of sporadic incoming from artillery, I remember as well, and it was all a bit sporadic. We moved behind 3 Para as sort of brigade reserve on the night that they attacked Mount Longdon. And I can remember, up in the distance, that attack going down onto Mount Longdon. It was 3 Para doing it, and the battalion actually moved up alongside Mount Longdon, ready to support it, which we didn't end up doing. We were held in reserve, and obviously history tells us 3 Para did take that. But we did move up very close to Mount Longdon, waiting for the next move. And that next move did turn out to be a battalion attack on Wireless Ridge, which I think that the first night that we got the orders for doing it, it got cancelled. I think that was maybe due to coordinating fire support, because there was a lot of fire support given to us on that attack, unlike Goose Green.
Mm.
So the move off from where we were next to Mount Longdon, just on the north side of Mount Longdon, off onto Wireless Ridge, was the next move for the battalion.
So Wireless Ridge was a properly, if you'd like, classic planned attack with good fire support, or even scimitars giving you fire support.
Yeah, there was a lot of fire support for that. We had there were 2 mortar platoons, 2 Para and 3 Para mortar platoon. The Anchor OP was on Mount Longdon. There was a battery of guns. We had a whole battery of guns. There was naval gunfire support, and Scorpions and scimitars from the Blues and Royals. So there was a lot. It was a classic battalion deliberate night attack.
Yeah.
A deliberate noisy attack. All element of surprise had gone by then anyway, and I think the plan was if the element of surprise had gone, the positions on there, they were expected to be attacked. It was one of the last features around Port Stanley. They knew it was coming. I think it was planned that might as well hit them hard with everything, so break their morale before we get onto positions anyway.
Yeah.
And the plan was on the Big Long Ridge, A and B Company to assault on the north side of the ridge, stopping before the top, and then for D Company to assault along the top of the ridge, which we did. Again, it wasn't as easy as planned. There was a hell of a lot of fire support, but there was some pretty stiff resistance up there as well. And we were in range of their guns in Port Stanley. So there was a lot of fire coming down. It was quite a difficult feature to fight along, quite a lot of rocky outcrops on there, and there were some pretty stiff positions that didn't want to give up. Actually, there was one particular 0.5 position, 0.5 Browning in the rocks, that it just seemed everything that got thrown at it, it just, you think, right, that's done it this time. He's been whacked with the Scorpions, have given him a go with mortared it. They put a couple of Milan rounds in there, and bang, 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 he was back again. He's never going to give up. And it was eventually taken out by a rifle section with bullets and bayonets.
Amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
You any idea what sort of troops these were? Were these?
There were there was a mixture on Wireless Ridge. As we found out, there was a mixture of conscripts and regular troops. There were also some airborne troops there. D Company, when D Company managed to get to its limit of exploitation, which was as per the briefing, there was a line of telegraph poles that ran along the ridge. That was our LOE. And actually, D Company got to that, and our platoon had been pushed right to the extreme end. And we were out on a flank. We were actually counterattacked by Argentinian paratroops by about platoon strength of them.
So that was probably that was the only counter.
I think it was. Yeah. And they got pretty close. Close. And a couple of guys got wounded by a grenade. They were in front of us shouting orders in Spanish. We were in a hasty defence of mainly craters that had been caused by our own naval gunfire. And we sort of formed a hasty defensive position in there. And it was actually, we had a few pretty hairy hours up on the end there. It's, my thoughts afterwards were I'd much rather be attacking than in defence.
Oh, really?
Pretty uncomfortable being in a hole with quite a lot of incoming, and then it becoming apparent that they were, launching a counter-attack. You've got to fight this off. I'm much happier darting from rock to rock or position to position, finding my own bit of cover rather than just staying in this one that I've got to hold, although we were in quite a big hole, there were 3 of us in there. So we sat there for, their counter-attack got beaten off. But there was a lot of incoming.
So these were they're professionals.
Yeah. And it also, they were quite, they were withdrawing back into Stanley, and it was a case of just holding this position until first light. And, and I suppose bigger picture, which I certainly wasn't thinking of as a Tom, but looking back now, bigger picture, waiting for all of those positions around Port Stanley to be secured, all those objectives like Mount Tumbledown and some of the smaller ones like Goat Ridge and things, but they all had to be secured. And as it was getting light, you could see the Argentinians withdrawing in their hundreds back in towards Port Stanley down various sides of hills.
Was this withdrawing voluntarily, or under orders, or just just?
Some were obviously doing it with some sort of order. Others, they were just legging it off of their positions. Quite a bit of breakdown of command and control amongst them. But our position sort of got a bit easier and easier as the light came on, the artillery died down. There was a strike by scout helicopters with, I believe, anti-tank missiles on them that nobody told us about. It just popped up above our position and whacked these rockets across towards these withdrawing Argentinian troops, which was quite spectacular. I wish someone had told us that was going to happen. Didn't know. But sort of testament to the amount of fire support that we got up there. We had just about everything you can imagine that supported us. And a few hours after first light, a lot of the firing had died down by then, most of it actually. We were called in. It was all surreal, almost a bit like index on an exercise. Yeah. Sort of called in, told to put your berries on. And we were basically told we're going to get down there. We're going to get down into Port Stanley. We're going to go in there and say, we are going to be the first into Port Stanley. It become a race between the units. We were tabbing at quite some speed and pretty tired as well, but tabbing down once we got down through what was left of the old Marine barracks at Moody Brook, which had been pretty sort of smashed up and blown up, down onto the main road and tabbing down this road to be the first into Port Stanley. And we were held just on the edge of the town. Whilst obviously the official surrender was being negotiated and taking place. But yeah, I suppose Tupara did, from being the first to land at San Carlos and the first into action at Goose Green, ended up actually being the first to reach the outskirts of Port Stanley.
And the only battalion to fight 2 battles over.
Two land actions, yeah.
Yeah. So quite a record.
Yeah. Yeah. At the time, of course, at the time, you don't think of these things.
No, of course not.
You don't put it all into perspective like that. And I just remember at the time being down and having got that far, going down that road in Port Stanley, absolutely exhausted, completely exhausted. That's my one memory from that morning, has been dead on my feet, tabbing down that road into Port Stanley. Absolutely, I was going to fall asleep walking along the road, and not really. People say, "Oh, he must have been pleased it was over." It wasn't over. No one had said, "Oh, it's totally over." So, well, they've all withdrawn back into Stanley.
Was there any expectation of having to clear further positions or any holdouts or anything like that?
Yeah, that had been part of the orders, was that we may have to exploit. You might have to go into amphibious fighting. Built up area mode down in Port Stanley, which no one was looking forward to, because that would have been massive casualties plus the building. It wouldn't have been like fighting in your traditional town, because it was all the buildings
wood. Yeah.
No cover from anything, so they probably caught light very quickly if that did happen.
Yeah,
thankfully,
like the schoolhouse, I suppose.
Yeah, that's right. And yeah, sort of, we all just got sort of we got put into, there were a row of bungalows and basically commandeered them, put a platoon into each. And that first night in Port Stanley, there'd been no official surrender. They hadn't officially signed the surrender document. And we were told there are still Argentinians walking around with weapons. You might see some. It's a bit odd. I didn't actually see it myself, but during the night, the surrender was
finally signed.
Yeah, they did sign surrender, and we then sort of, as from the following morning, went into sort of occupation mode, if you like, prisoner handling, admin, clearing up.
So, how long were you in Stanley and in the Falklands after that? After the surrender,
it was about a week to 10 days. We did have we got put onto a troop ship, one of the ones similar to the Galahad. Got put onto there for a cleanup and some admin, and then came back to the house. We got used to working from these platoon houses. B Company had 3 bungalows, and we were working from them. It was a mixture of sort of, it was a bit like guard duties, with prisoner guarding, taking teams of ordnance disposal. I remember I spent one day up on the main airfield at Port Stanley, escorting some ordnance guys who wanted to go and look at Argentinian aircraft ordnance and how that was going to be disposed of.
A big clear up going on.
Yeah, and we didn't know how long we were going to be sort of drawn into all that. As I say, it's about 10 days later, a week to 10 days, we got told we were going back on the same ship, on the Norland, which had been used while between the end of the campaign and that point, had been used taking Argentinian prisoners back to Argentina. So we got back on it, and 2 battalions squeezed on there for the return journey, us and 3-bar, and it took us as far as Ascension Island, where we then flew back to RAF Bryce Norton from Ascension Island.
So what sort of welcome did you get at Bryce Norton?
It's great. Yeah, all the band were there, and Prince Charles, everybody's families were there. Hadn't been told when we were landing, so it was sort of, land, meet up with your families, and straight on our first initial bit of leave that we had. We had about a week off, and we had to go back to Aldershot because there was admin to be done. There was freight arriving by sea, all had to be unloaded, and then after that, we got a good few weeks off again. After that, we got a proper sort of post-Falklands leave after that.
And then was there any sort of, once you got back to battalion after leave, was there any sort of debrief? Was there, people, lessons learned, that type of thing?
Not really, not down at, I don't remember any down at our level. There was a lot of getting roped into parades and things. There was a lot of, I remember there was a lot of checking everybody's number 2 dress fitted, which everyone had lost a load of weight while we were down there. consequently got tailored. Everyone went on leave, put it back on again, come back to tight number 2 dress. Lots of parades, you know.
Yeah.
You know, freedom of Rushmore and all these sort of things. So there was a lot of that going on. There, on the lessons learned side, no, and it wasn't. I suppose that is a lesson learned in itself, because now there's after guys come back from operations, as we've seen with Afghanistan, you know, what they call decompression, you know, spending a few days getting their head straight and having a blowout, which of course we didn't, which was in 1982. There wasn't any, that wasn't given much thought.
No.
And that's probably one of the things that caused problems for some people.
Yeah, certainly.
We're back, life back to normal kind of thing.
Yeah.
I know that the on the lessons learned side, I was a private soldier, it didn't involve me. I know that NCOs were selected to go to the School of Infantry at Brecon to talk about their experiences, NCOs and officers.
Yeah.
So obviously the School of Infantry was saying, well, this is the first time I've had a land conflict since Korea, full-size land conflict, war fighting, if you like, and very keen to, you know, weave that into the teaching and the tactics for the wider infantry. And a lot of that was taken on board. By the time I did a section commander's course in '85, they were talking about the experiences of the Falklands and were teaching slightly different tactics.
Yeah, platoon and section tactics changed completely, really.
Platoon and section
drop off of fire support all the way down to the
all the way down to grenade man and his cover man taking out a position, because as we said, you know, you can't just keep skirmishing forward until you hit a trench and then just sort of fire at it as you run past. It doesn't happen. You got to stop and deal with it properly, get in and deal with it. And that was lessons learned. And there's been a lot that's obviously been developed in the decades since, you know, different weapon systems, but that principle of actually getting in there, sticking a grenade in the hole, as opposed to from a distance lobbing it and hoping that it lands in the right place, you know, is all sort of developed on the hoof, if you like, in the Falklands, you know, laying there where can't skirmish, you can't, you know, you got to get off your belt buckle and go and do something, but you got to stay down low while you do it and get in there and actually destroy that position, check it's destroyed, before you move on to the next one. And it's a slower process. I wouldn't say slower, but a far more deliberate process than the old section battle drill used to be with the gun group and the rifle group. Yeah.
And what was with you? What did your career? Where did it take you after Falklands?
Pretty solid rifle company career up to corporal. The year afterwards we did the long awaited Belize tour, but a year late, which was fantastic. Nice little break in the sun, but it was a good hard tour, you know, jungle training, jungle operation. It was an operational tour, although there wasn't that much going on, just there as a show of force for the Guatemalans. Subsequent Northern Ireland tours that went on, and as a corporal, I did a tour at Depot Para, section commander, back at Browning Barracks before it closed down, and was the training was moved to Litchfield and Catterick, or just Catterick as it is now. So yeah, took one of the last platoons through Browning Barracks, was a corporal there. Subsequent years after that, back in battalion, platoon sergeant of a rifle company, rifle platoon, and also patrols platoon, and tours after that away as an instructor, as you tend to later on in your career through, and back to battalion for certain appointments, colour sergeant, finishing as a WO2.
Where did you finish as
22 years service? Finished as WO2 as one of the team training warrant officers at OPTAG, the Operational Training Advisory Group, which was sort of based out of Shorncliffe, which had been in previous days Northern Ireland training. By then had moved on to training troops for worldwide operations, Bosnia, Kosovo, and Iraq tours at that point.
Right. Okay. So you've done your full 22. What did
26
you do
and a half,
Oh, 26
when all was said and done, if you counted the junior para bit and the bit of full-time reserve service I did at the end as well. I didn't go on the long service list. I did a few years full-time reserve service, basically at the same training team.
Right.
FTRS was becoming quite a big thing at that point, actually. I think, and long service. There was a lot more long service roles, and they decided it wasn't a good idea to sort of just lose guys out of the army age 40 who was still, fit
and healthy,
well trained. Yeah, not in the front line roles, but losing people out of all these training roles. I know people are staying in even longer these days.
Yeah.
So a good, good 26 and a half years of my life.
What did you do? What came for you after the army?
After the army, I went into the security industry.
Right.
I didn't take the bait and go out into the Middle East, as a lot of the guys were doing. I was getting a lot of job offers at the time. I wanted to stay mainly UK based, and I worked in London.
Yeah.
Training security staff, big corporate organisations, and I did that for a number of years. Large corporate, Docklands areas, city, and went into head of security data center companies, this kind of thing, and spent a while self-employed as a consultant, and find myself now so able to take my foot off the gas slightly.
Well deserved.
Yeah.
Okay, Mark, that's been fantastic. Really interesting. Thank you for your time. And
That's great.
Let's catch up sometime soon.
Thank you. Thanks.
Cheers.